Boker Tov, Chodesh Tov, Chanukah Sameach. Today's daf is daf Samach Aleph in Nidrim. Yiboilu, 5 lines from the top of the page. Yiboilu, Amar Yain She'eni Toam Yovel. If a man says that I'm not going to taste any wine for Yovel. Now the Ran says didn't just say the word She'eni Toam Yovel, because Yovel it could mean for 50 years. Does it mean he's in the middle of a Yovel, right? Middle, like we're always in the middle of a Yovel somewhere, right? Middle of a 50-year cycle. So we yesterday the Gemara's question was, if he just says Yom, is that like Hayom, like today, meaning tonight at Marav time it's over, or is it like for Liyom, for a 24-hour cycle? So here too, if we would just say Yovel, we don't know, does he mean this Yovel and this 50-year cycle? Does he mean for 50 years? So the Ran says he doesn't do, it's not exactly the way the Gemara reads it, She'eni Toam Yovel, but he just said it's Ilav the Kamar Haday, Lisha says the Ran on the left side there, 5 lines down in the narrow lines. Like we were in Post the Shah, if the word Yom is like for Liyom Echad or Hayom, or just for today. So therefore we can't ask that question because we have to go to Chumrah, and so it means for 50 years. But really Yovel said, he said in this Yovel. He said in this Yovel, right? We're in the middle of a 50-year cycle. He says in this Yovel. So the question is, this Yovel, okay, we understand. So it's for 50 years, right? For this Yovel. But the question is Yovel part of the previous cycle? Is Yovel the end of a 50-year cycle, or is it the beginning of a new cycle? That's the question. Yovel zeh, is the 50th year Yovel like the early, like 49 years prior to that, like that part of the cycle, or is it part of the next cycle? Tashmat's famous machlokas between Rav Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Tashmat Tanya pluked Rav Yehuda Rabbanan to machlokas. Pasukos v'kidash m'shem chamishim shana. You should sanctify the 50th year. Shnas chamishim atamona. You count the 50th year as Yovel. V'atamona shnas chamishim v'achas. You don't count the 50th year as both the 50th year of Yovel, the 50th year of the end of a cycle, and the beginning of the next Shemitah year. The way we do, we just count. How do we count? We assume the Chum Shita, you have 7 cycles of 7 years. A Shemitah is a cycle of 7 years. That's 7 times 7 is 49. Then you have Yovel, that's the 50th year, right? That's the 50th year. The next year after Yovel, the 51st year, is the beginning of a new Shemitah cycle and the beginning of a new Yovel cycle. That's how the Rabbanan hold. That's what he says. You count the 50th year as the 50th year, but not as the first year of the next cycle. Right? You don't count it as the 50th year, and that Yovel year is also beginning of a new Shemitah cycle. Yovel is not part of the 7-year cycle of Shemitah. You have a 7-year cycle of Shemitah, you have another one. You have 7 cycles of 7, that's 49. Then you have Yovel is the 50th year. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yovel Ola Leminyan Shavua. He says it counts. In other words, the Yovel year is also the first year of the next cycle, of the 7-year cycle of Shemitah. Amr Rabbi Yehuda says, understand. Harei Omer Pasuk says, Sheisham Tizra Sarecha. It says 6 years shall you plant, and in the 7th year Shemitah, you let it lay fallow. You don't do anything in the 7th year. But if Yovel, listen to this, if Yovel is the first year of a Shemitah cycle, well, you can't plant in Yovel either. So that cycle, if Yovel is the first year, how many years have you planted when you get to Shemitah? 5, because the first year is a Yovel. The 7th year, 6 years after that is the Shemitah, the 7th year. So how many years did you plant? The 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, right? 5 years. Because the first year is Yovel. First year of Shemitah is Yovel, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So you can't plant that year, so you can only plant the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. So only have 5 years. Only have 5 years. You're right. You're right. That first year, the first Shemitah of a 50-year cycle, of let's say of 7 cycles, you only have 5 years of planting. The other ones you will have, right? The other ones are normal. You don't have a Yovel. Yovel is only once every 50 years. Technically, it's not even 50 years. It'll be 40. Next time it'll be the 49th and the 48th, because each time you'll lose time. according to Rav Yehuda. But in any case, let's just see. So he said to them, with the Vrechem also, according to you, it's also not going to work out. Harei Omer says, the Pasuk says, listen, you have 7 years of 7 cycles of Shemitah, then you have Yovel, and the Pasuk says, maybe you'll be afraid that, hey, Yomer, what are you going to say? What are you going to eat? If you can't eat, you can't plant during Shemitah. Let's say the 49th year is Shemitah, and you can't plant according to Rabbanan. Yovel is the according to everybody. After the 7th cycle, you have a Yovel. So you have the 49th year, you can't plant, and the 50th year you can't plant. So the pasuk says, don't worry, Hashem is going to give us a bracha that the tefua from the 48th year that you plant in the 48th year will last for the 48th, the 49th, and the 50th. So you'll have for 3 years. What do you mean? According to you need 4, because you need that the plantings of the 48th year have to last for the 48th, the 49th, the 50th. Can't plant in the 49th and 50th at all, and into the 51st year, right? What are you going to eat until you have a crop in the 51st year? The crop from the 48th year has to last for 48, 49, 50, and 51. So it's 4. So according to you also it doesn't work out. You're saying according to me it doesn't work out because you don't have 6 years of planting followed by Shemitah, because in the first Shemitah cycle, the first year is Yovel. So the first, because according to Rav Yehuda, Yovel is not a separate time that's not included in the Shemitah cycles. It's the first year of the Shemitah cycle. So that year you only have 5 years of planting. Okay, but in the other cycles during that 50-year period, you have 6 years. So he says, they said to him it doesn't work out, but he said to them, according to you, it also doesn't work out. Because according to me, and according to you, it also doesn't work out because you say the 48th year has to last for 4 years, 48, 49, 50, and 51. So it doesn't work out according to you either. You need 4. Ella, the answer is you could say, yes, it doesn't work out all the other times, but it works out normally. So it works out the other times. So normally, when you have a Shemitah cycle, right, in a regular Shemitah cycle, you can't plant in Shemitah, right? So therefore, the tefua from the 6th year has to last for the 6th and the 7th into the 8th year. That's 3 years. So that's how it works. My case also when he said over here, the pasuk says Sheishan Tizra Sadcha, you should plant for 6 years. You're right. It doesn't work according to me. 6 years doesn't work out if that Shemitah cycle has a Yovel at the beginning, because according to me, Rav Yehuda, Yovel is the first year of the next Shemitah cycle. Most Shemitah cycles don't have a Yovel, right? There's only once in 50 years or approximately 50 years. So most we don't have a Shemitah in there. I don't have a Yovel in there. So most of them will have 6 years plus a 7th year will be Shemitah. But but once in a while, if you have a Yovel, when Yovel is part of the Shemitah cycle, you only have 5 years of planting, the 2nd through the 6th years. So that's the machlokas here. So according to our Gemara, Reb Yehuda holds that when it comes to Yovel, Yovel is not only the 50th year or let's call it the year after the 7th cycle of Shemitah. It's also, when you have a Yovel, it's also the first of the next year. So it's not even 50-year cycles, 50, 50, 50, right? Because after 49 years, you have a Yovel, but Yovel is also the beginning of the next cycle. So it's not a full 50. You understand? It's also the beginning of the next cycle. So you don't have it. It's not like a clear group of 50 years. Pardon? 49. It's 49. It's 49. And then afterwards, it'll go down to 48. Because every time you have a cycle, a Yovel, you're losing really effectively a year. So it's really like 49. Call it the 48 to 49. But the point is that you don't have full 50 years. In Yerushalmi, Rav Yerushalmi holds that according to Rav Yehuda, the Yovel has nothing to do with Shemitah. The Yovel is 50-year cycles. It's a different series, meaning the Yovel is Yovel. Every 50 years is Yovel, and Shemitah is Shemitah. Sometimes Yovel can come out on the 2nd year of a Shemitah, so on the 6th year of a Shemitah. They're two independent countings. That's how the Yerushalmi holds in Rav Yehuda. But anyway, we go like the Chachamim, that you have 7 cycles of 7 years. That's 49, and then Yovel is the 50th year, and Yovel does not count for the beginning of the next cycle. Yovel is independent, and in Hanami, during that time, when you have Yovel, you'll have what you plant in the 48th year will have to last for the 48th, 49th, 50th, and into the 51st year. The Mishnah said on yesterday's daf that if a man says, I'm not going to eat anything, let's say I'm not going to have wine until Pesach. On Pesach, you have to drink wine. You have to abrikosas. Not going to have wine ad Pesach. Then it's ad Pesach means ad v'lo ad b'chlal. In general, the Ran brings down over here. It's the Ran is on our page on Samachala, but it's really based on the Mishnah. When people say until this and this day, they mean until that day, not including through the day. If I say I'm going to do this every day until next Sunday, I don't mean including next Sunday. I mean up until Sunday begins. So that's the general lashon. So when a person says ad, means until Pesach, not including Pesach. Rav Meir says, but if he says ad shi'eh, I'm going to do this until this thing is done, so to speak, actually until it is here. So if I say that's like saying I'm doing it through next Sunday. Actually, until through I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do this through next Sunday. Actually, until that Sunday is. That's until the Sunday goes out, until that time is gone. So if he says ad Pesach, it means until Pesach begins. If he says ad shi'eh, as long as there is still Pesach there, that means he's forbidding himself, let's say, wine through Pesach until Pesach is over. Ad shi'eh. Let's say he says ad pnei Pesach, until the face of Pesach, or ad lifnei. And our Mishnah reads it lifnei, but most of the Rishonim have it as pnei, including the Ran. Ad pnei Pesach. That means as long as, so there's a question. Pnei Pesach means till Pesach begins, till you see Pesach. There's a machlokas here. Rav Meir says it's asher et shegia till it begins. Rav Yosef says asher et shegia until it goes out. What do we mean by that? When a person says I'm not going to have anything until Pesach, right? If he just says ad Pesach, so he means that not including Pesach. If he says ad shi'eh until Pesach is here, that means through the entire Pesach. What happens if he says ad pnei Pesach? What does that mean? So Rav Meir says in our Mishnah, it's only until Pesach begins. Why? Because it's not sure what you mean. If you say until Pesach, it means until Pesach begins. If you say ad pnei, not sure what that means. So Rav Meir says the Gemara, Rav Meir savar ad lo ma'al sake. A person's not going to put himself into an uncertain situation. Meaning, when you say until, I say I'll do this until next Pesach. Do you mean until Pesach begins or until it's over? If you say until, it means until it begins. If you say as long as it's there, actually, as long as it's like saying through Pesach, until Pesach is here, that means as long as Pesach is here, I can't do it. If he says ad pnei Pesach, not sure what that means. So Rav Meir says, listen, a person doesn't want to put himself in an uncertain situation. Since it can mean both things, you say what's definite. What's definite is until Pesach begins. When I say ad pnei Pesach, I'm certainly including everything before Pesach, until Pesach begins. So Rav Meir says the suffix a person wouldn't put himself into. He wouldn't put himself into on such a day. Therefore, it only means until Pesach begins. That's definite. It's definite that I'm including in the netter until Pesach begins, not necessarily after Pesach goes on through Pesach. Person doesn't put himself in the suffix. Rav Yossi and I'm in base. Rav Yossi said, "Mileage is like a person puts himself that the sveka." That's apparently the machlokes between Rav Meir and Rav Yossi. Now, the Ram brings down it's more in Eruvin that when you have machlokes Rav Meir and Rav Yossi, that loch is like Rav Yossi. So according to this, Pnei Pesach would be until Pesach is over. That's what the Mishnah said. Rav Yossi has ad she'etza until Pesach is over. Says the Gemara now, V'raminu. No, in the second line on the base, V'ramini. Let's say a man is married. A man has two wives or had two wives. Man had two wives. We'll call Leah and Rachel, right? He had two wives. And from each wife gave him two daughters. He was first married to Leah. He had two daughters. Let's call them number one and number two, right? From his first wife. Then later on, Leah died. Let's say he divorced her and he married Rachel, married another woman. And he had two daughters with her too, 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's the order of their birth order. 1, 2, 3, and 4. But 1 and 2 was from the first wife, right? That they were the first ones born. Then he married another woman, and he had number 3 and number 4, 4 girls. And he said, if a person has 2 sets of girls, 2 wives, Amar, now we know that a man has the right to marry off his daughter until she's the age of 12 and a half. So he says, listen, I made a shidduch I got the best boy from the yeshiva, and made a shidduch with who? Kidash es biti agdola. I married off my oldest daughter. What did he mean by my oldest daughter, the Gdola? What do you mean by that? Okay. The Eni Odea, I married off the oldest one. I remember I made a deal. We were drinking a little bit, so I got confused. And I don't know if I meant in Gdolish, if I meant number one, the first one of the older girls, number one and number two. That would be number one of the older girls. In Gdolish, maybe I meant the older one of my second wife, who would be number three. Maybe I meant that. Or Im Tanisha Gdolos. Or maybe I meant number two, she Gdolos, because she's older than number three. I said I married off my older daughter. Let's say not my oldest daughter. I married off my older daughter. I'm not sure what I meant. Did I mean the oldest daughter, number one? Did I mean number three, who was the oldest of the second group? Or did I mean number two, who is older than number three? I married my the older daughter. So Kulan Asurus, they're all Asur. He doesn't know who he married off. He married her off to a guy. He's not sure who he married off. Is the guy? Huh? Maybe he's also drunk. He doesn't know, but he had chup and kedusha. They were Adam, but now he's not sure. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. Kulan Asuros, they're all Asur. The gear takes the chutzman akashmas. The only one that's not forbidden is number four, because number four certainly he didn't mean her, right? She's the youngest. The youngest. There's no way she's not an older daughter. Okay, that's what Rav Meir says. Rav Meir chutzman akashmas, meaning a person puts himself into a suffix. A person would say something where he's not sure afterwards. He's not sure what he meant. Rabbi Yossi Amar no, kul mutaras chutzman negotiables. They're all mutar. Numbers number two, number three, number four are definitely single. The only one that he meant is number one, because he said the older daughter. So obviously he meant the oldest one. A person wouldn't put himself into a suffix. He couldn't have meant number two and number three. Number two and number three is questionable. Number one is a definite. That could be if you're not sure, number one is definitely, he could have meant her. But he couldn't have put him at number two, number three. He wouldn't have meant number two, number three, because that would be confusing. It's uncertain. So what do you see? Rabbi Yossi is the one that says a person wouldn't put himself in an uncertain situation. Rav Meir says you would. You're right. We switch around the shittas. We reverse the shittas in our Mishnah. We say, in our Mishnah we read, I'm back on Sanach, yesterday's daf, we said that Rav Meir says, Pnei means Ad Sheyagia. No, it means until Pesach is over. And Rav Yossi says it's only till Pesach begins, because that's for sure. It surely meant that. V'hatanya, and this is a proof that we have a proof because we have a brisa which says in Sefer Zaklau, Koshas Manakamu, if it's got a fixed time, we're going to talk about that in the next mission also. Something has a fixed time. You know when Pesach begins, Pesach, right? We know today is Rosh Chodesh Tevis. We know the thing has a definite time, but Omar, and he said, Ad Pnei, until the face of that day, or until that begins. Rav Meir says Ad Shiyetze, till it's over, because a person puts himself in a suffix. Did he mean until the day begins, or does it mean through the whole day? Rav Meir says, yeah, until you have to go, the Chomer person puts himself in an uncertain situation. He definitely meant until that day begins, but it doesn't mean that day is included too, or Pesach or the Yontiv is included too. Meir says, yeah, we put himself in suffix. Rav Yossi says Achigir, only till it begins. So you see over here that the shittas are turns around. Rav Yossi says only what's definite, meaning until it begins, until that day. If you said until Sunday, until Pesach, until whatever, until the beginning of that. And Rav Meir says no, even it goes through the entire time. The Ran brings down over here that the Gemara in Ksubas, I think it is, in Ksubas says that in Kedushin rather, Kedushin says the Gemara has the same kasha as Rav Meir and Rav Yossi. What do they hold? Rav Meir in our Mishnah seems to say that a person doesn't put himself in something, the rest of this does. And there from the Gemara with the four girls, 1, 2, 3, and 4, it seems the opposite. And the Gemara says, does not turn it around. But the Gemara gives a different reason. Rav Meir says, the question is, what does Pnei mean? Rav Meir says, Pnei is like Ad Sheyagia. And Rav Yossi says, no, Ad Pnei means until it's over. In other words, it doesn't say it's based on whether you put yourself into a suffix or not. But in the case of the four girls, you could say the machlokes is, does a person put himself into a suffix or not? There you could say that. And there, Rav Meir says that a person does put himself in the suffix, the rest doesn't. Over here, it's a different machlokes. But the Ran prefers our Gemara that we mechlefes hashita, we turn it around because we're talking about Nadarim, and this is Masechta Nadarim probably, but it brings out as a machlokes what the halacha is l'maisa. In any case, the Ran said that the machlokes Rav Meir and Rav Yossi, we pass with Rav Yossi, and since our Gemara turns it around and says Rav Yossi is the one who says Ad Pnei is like Ad, or Ad Sheyagia, means Ad the law Abachla, and it's not included. Says the Mishnah. We're in the Mishnah now in Samach and Beis. Ada Katsir. If a man says, I'm not going to eat a certain thing, and this is going to be usher to me until the harvest. Katsir means the grain harvest, the 5 grains, right? Wheat, barley, oats, spelt, and rye. That's the grain harvest. So he says, now, the difficulty here is we're not talking about until Pesach or until Sunday or until a specific day. We're talking about until the harvest. Now, the harvest doesn't have a definite day, right? It's a certain time. So Adakatzir, if he says until the grain harvest, Adabatzir until the grape harvest, Adamasik until the olive harvest, Eino Asr Elad Sheyagia. It's only until it begins. It's not through the entire period of the harvest. Here's the general rule. Cautious if it's got a fixed date, Pesach's got a fixed date, Rosh Hashanah's got a fixed date, Rosh Chodesh has a fixed date, Ba'amar Ad Sheyagia. It's got a fixed date, and he says Ad Sheyagia. So Asr Ad Sheyagia. Whether he said Ad or Ad Sheyagia, it means until it begins. It's like the man said in Lashon B'Ne'anim, people mean up until, but not including, right? Ad below Ad B'chlal. I mean, if you want to be sure about something, you say Ad B'chlal or Ad below Ad B'chlal, right? Well, you say I'm going to do this until next Monday, it means Monday's not included. Amar Ad Shehei, but if he says until it will be, that means it includes the whole day too. Asr Ad Shehei, so that includes, that's Ad below Ad B'chlal. That's when something has a specific date, like it's got a definite date. If it doesn't have a specific date, because we're talking about a harvest period, it's not a specific date on the calendar. Whether he said Ad Shehei, when a person says until a certain time period on the calendar, but he didn't give a definite date, like the harvest, then it's only until it begins. That's the Lashon, and that's how it means. And he gives an example. Arakayitz. Why is this summer called the Kayitz? It's called the Kayitz because they pluck off, they harvest the figs at that time. And that's called harvesting with your hand. That's Kayitz. That's what Ron says, Kayitz or Kayitz. Kayitz man lakitz pairs. It's when you gather in, you harvest the figs. Bakari like Kayitz. Why is it called Kayitz? Because they pluck it by hand. Okay. So here in the Mishnah it says an example of what we just said. He said if it doesn't have a definite time like a harvest, Arakayitz, Achei Kayitz. Right? If he says Arakayitz, Achei Kayitz. If he says Arakayitz or Achei Kayitz, either way, it's not a harvest, it's not a definite time. So whether he said Arakayitz or he said Achei Kayitz, because until the people start gathering in the baskets, they gather the figs in baskets. So that's the point here, that since it's not a definite date on the calendar, it's not like Pesach or Shavuos or Sukkot or Yom Tov or whatever, or Chodesh, or Sunday or Monday or whatever. It doesn't have a definite date. If it's got a definite date and he said Ad or Ad Shegi, it means until that date, but not including that date. If he said Ad Shegi, it includes that day too, or that holiday of Pesach or Shavuos or whatever. But if it's something that doesn't have a definite date, like a harvest period, then whether he said Ad Akayitz or he said Ad Shegi, either way, it's only until it begins. Ad Sheyavar Akayitz, if he says until the harvest period has passed, well, then it's pretty clear. Then Ad Sheyakpilo Mitzos, that's until they finish doing the harvest. Yakpilo Mitzos means until they fold up the knives. They use the knives for cutting down, let's say, they used the knives when they wanted to cut off a whole cluster of figs when they made fig cakes or grapes or other things. Then they use knives. So when they folded up the knives, they put them away. Their pocket knife they folded up, or whatever knife they had, they folded up and put them away. That's what he means when he says Ad Sheyavar until the harvest has passed. That means until people put away their knives and no harvesting anymore. Tana. So the Gemara is like this. Kalko Sham, when we said a basket, Kalko Shlim, we're talking about a basket of figs. Because Kayitz means figs, because that's what you cut down by hand. Kayitz means plucking or cutting or harvesting by hand. So it says, if you said out of Kayitz, it means until people start putting figs in the basket. Below Kalkashanava, not grapes. Tanya, we have machlokas about it. Tanya, no to me Paris of Kayitz. If you say, I'm not going to have all Paris of the Kayitz, of the harvest, are usher to me, I know to me Paris of Kayitz, ain't usher elevating, only figs, because only figs are generally plucked by hand. So when he says Kayitz, it means until the harvest of the figs, right? Or what is harvested by hand, Peres Kayitz, he means only the figs. Shmuel says, no, grapes are included in that too. My time, what's the machlokas? My time, Tanakama. Tanakama, it's Savartain and Biyada. Figs are harvested by hand, they're plucked, and therefore Kayitz refers to figs only. So if I say I'm not going to have fruits of the Kayitz, that means only the figs. Anavim lo miktamiyad. Anavim are not cut down by figs. They use a knife and cut off, I guess, the whole cluster. Shmuel Savar, Shmuel says no. Anavim nami, no, grapes also. Kimir the nix of the other. When their stems dry up, when the stems dry up, they're also pulled down by hand. In other words, grapes also, they're cut with a knife only when they're moist, but when the stems have dried up, they're also plucked down by hand. So Shmuel says, when you make a neder, you're not going to pay. So the kayetz, it includes grapes as well as the figs.
Isn't the word different for grapes? The word for grapes is batzir.
Right. But he didn't say batzir. He said, I know to me peiros kayetz. I make a neder, I'm not going to have the fruits of the kayetz, of the harvest. So what do you kayetz?
Like
Right. He didn't say, but he didn't say batzir. If he said, if he says ada katzir, ada batzir, ada masik, ada mesik, he means yes until the grain harvest begins, until the grape harvest or it begins, or until the olive harvest begins. But again, the Mishnah says since it doesn't have a definite date, it means until it begins. Unless he says until the harvest passes, that means, but again, kayetz generally refers to, according to our Mishnah, according to the Tanakhama here, that the kayetz refers only to the fig harvest, not to the grape harvest. If he meant grape harvest, he would have said that. Right? No, that's maybe it's a machlokas. What lashon me'anim is could be. It could be there's a machlokas. We're going by lashon me'anim. What do we mean by that? Exactly, because Rav Shmuel says no, enough are also sometimes cut down by hand. So kayetz can refer to grapes also. Kayetz means interesting. That kayetz means we refer to that kayetz means the summer. Probably that's when they harvested the figs. So that's why it's called kayetz. But it's based on the idea that kayetz means plucking by hand the figs. Shmuel says they pluck by hand grapes too. So kayetz can refer to grapes as well. Achi ever kayetz until. If you say until, so ad, whether you said ad or ad, when it's something which doesn't have a definite date on the calendar or a definite time of the day, and you say ad or ad shi'ahei, either way means until it begins. Unless you said ad shi'avra, until the whole period passes. Ad shi'avra kayetz, that means ad shi'yachpilu ha'miktzos, until the knives are folded up. Interesting lashon that the Mishnah has it yakpilu, means folding. And here in the Gemara, he lists it as achiechbum, so it's doubled over. It means the same thing, folded over, kefel or double, right? Means you fold it into two. As here is the same meaning as yakpilu. So some had our Mishnah reads yakpilu with a kuf. Here it says yakpilu in the Gemara. It says it refers to the Mishnah as being yakpilu with a chaf. It means the same idea. Tana achiechpilu rav mitzos. Not every last person. There's a million people harvesting their figs, right? People got fig trees all over the place. You're going to say till the very last one has folded up his knife? Maybe there's some Yankel over there who's still plucking his stuff, after everybody is finished. So if most of the people have folded up their knives, then the harvest is over. So if a man forbade himself from eating, turkey sandwiches until the harvest, until the kayetz, the fig harvest is over, it means as long as when most of the people have folded up, most of the people harvesting their figs have folded up their knives. Tana. Now we just said before that they don't use the knives, right? They use a hand. But they do use the knives for, that's what the Ran says. If you look in the Ran on the right side, the second in Rashi in the Ran on the right side, there's in the Mishnah, there's two pieces of Ran. The first one explains what kayetz means. The second one is when they made fig cakes, then they use knives for it. They the pasuk in Tanakh that brings that does mikzos. Does means knives. Means because they pluck them. Regular figs are plucked by hand, but they also use knives when they want to make fig cakes. That's how they use a knife. I guess they cut them all in one group together, and they make fig cakes that way. So he says when they fold up the knives, then the harvest is totally over. Tana achiachpilu truvim says most of them are finished. That's good enough. Tana and on the Gemara and Samach basis like this. Tana huklu rovim tzos. Once most of the knives have been folded over, meaning they've stopped, they've finished the harvest, then you could assume mutaras mishum gezel. You could assume that field is he's given up. The owner, if he stopped harvesting the figs, and there's a few left over there, he's not makbid, and you could there's no gzeil over there. You could take them yourself because it's hefker. It's once he's finished the harvest. Whatever's left over there, he folded up the knives and he put them away. Whatever's left in the tree, anybody could take. It's hefker. It's not. There's no gezel. Upturas mina masers, and it's also pater maser. Maser is pater. Hefker is pater for maser. The Ran brings down the pasuk on the left side in the Ran at the top, second line of the page. It says Baal Levi. The Levi who gets the maser risham, he give it to him. He has no nachek nachek. You have to give him maser risham. Yatsa Hefker, excluding Hefker, Sheish L'Chelek Menachema. He's entitled to Hefker like anybody else. The Levi doesn't have any land, so you have to give him Meiser. But Hefker, he's entitled like anybody else. So Hefker is potter from Maser. So again, when they folded up, most of the knives have been folded up, then there's no issur of gezel. You could most people have finished their harvest of the figs, and you're allowed to take figs. If you see figs on a tree, you're allowed to. It's not gezel, and it's potter from Meiser because Hefker is Hefker basically. Hefker is potter from Meiser. A few stories. Rabbi Rav Yossi, Rav Yehuda, these two rabbis, so they came to a certain city. Most of the knives used for cutting down the figs were folded up, meaning put away for the season, and therefore any figs on the tree were considered to be hefker. Rabbi Avikachel, Rabbi ate from them. Rabbi Yossi, Rav Yehuda, he didn't eat. Here's my Asam Maram. The owner came. He saw the two rabbis there. He said to him, "Why aren't you eating?" Rabbi Yehuda wasn't eating. Rabbi apparently had finished eating. Why aren't you eating? Most of the knives have been folded up and put away already. And even so, he still didn't eat. He said the man said that really, he said it bitterly. He was upset. He said it like sarcastically. Why aren't you eating? Most of the knives have been cut up. Meaning he was mocked, even though technically, halachically, it was mutter to take, it was like hefker. But Rav Shapiro was more mocked, but he said that he felt, even after the guy said, why don't you eat it? He called him Miro Lev, says the Rashi. He wasn't mafka them. In this case, this guy wasn't. Generally, when most of the knives been folded up, so you can assume that it's hefker. But this guy wasn't mafka. He was dafka, wanted to keep me, even though he had folded up the knives. So some rabbis were more mafka. Another story. Rav Chama Rav Chanina Ikla Asri came to a certain city. This man Shukla Rav when the knives had been folded up already, meaning the harvest was over, and whatever figs were left on the tree were apparently hefker. Havika Ochel, he ate from the figs. Yav L'Shameh gave him to his servant. Lo Ochel, he didn't eat. Amalei Achol, you can eat. Kach Omer Lo Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi Mishamav. So said Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. The name of his father Rabbi Yossi was the posik. Huklu Rav Tzos. Once most of the knives have been folded up, with Taras Mishum Gezel, there's no need of Gezel anymore. It's Hefker. Upturas Mana Meiser, and it's Potter from Meiser because Hefker is Potter from Meiser. All right, we'll stop here. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem Chodesh Tov. Tomorrow's also we start tomorrow early davening also at 6 because of Zos Hanukkah. We'll pick it up from here from Rav Tarfon, another story with Rav Tarfon, famous story. We'll pick it up from there tomorrow. Have a good day. Shavua Tov, Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov, Shavua Tov, Beautiful.